The kings of ancient Egypt are the subject of a great number of tales and speculations. We have discovered commonplace and esoteric items from digs that demonstrate how opulent the country must have been. Yet many of these finds are still buried in mystery. More than just names, rulers like Nefertiti and Cleopatra are representations of the grace, charisma, and wisdom that has been lost to the passage of time. But in recent years, archaeologists have made some incredible discoveries that have improved our understanding of ancient Egyptian behavior and culture, as well as how they approach and resolve many of the issues that confront modern people today. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into some of the most unusual things that the ancient Egyptians did. So fasten your seatbelts, grab your explorer hat, and get ready to embark on an exciting adventure into the weird and wonderful world of ancient Egypt. Did you know that there was a thriving cosmetics business in ancient Egypt? They're often shown in pictures or artworks sporting a lot of eyeshadow and cosmetics. But did you realize that affluent leaders weren't the only ones with this kind of makeup? In Egypt, the cosmetics business was booming and almost everyone wore makeup to some degree. To keep their skin looking smooth and clear, they also used various kinds of oils, ointments, and creams. For many ancient Egyptians, washing and applying cream were unavoidable daily activities. Remember that the Egyptians endured a relentlessly hot climate during those long, agonizing years. This indicated that many of these oils and creams were applied not only for cosmetic purposes, but also to safeguard against burns and skin cancer. Like how we now use a scraper to remove dead skin from the soles of our feet and hands, they also created sophisticated tools that would be used to remove problematic patches of skin. The truth is that the ancient Egyptians weren't all that different from contemporary people. They also created eyeshadow, lipstick, blush, and kohl. These cosmetic goods were advertised to everyone, unlike in present times. Men and women would both wear lipstick, eyeliner, and eyeshadow. The emphasis on eyes in their culture, which eventually became the standard for them, contributed to some of this. To emphasize their eyes, they would add eyeshadow or kohl. Contrary to popular belief nowadays, males often wore more makeup than women. Although many ancient Egyptians used cosmetics for fashion purposes, their main function was to cleanse the skin and shield them from the sun's damaging rays and heat. For the Egyptians, hairstyles were very important. Many individuals used henna to color their skin and hair, thus it would play a significant part in hair care products. Yet one of the most bizarre aspects of Egyptian history that most of us are probably unaware of is that there were stringent guidelines for acceptable haircuts. It's impossible to specify exactly what these laws would have been since they would vary as new leaders came into power. But they would mostly stay the same throughout time. Pharaohs often had artificial beards around the chin's base. You've probably seen this in numerous Egyptian illustrations, and the majority of pharaohs' sarcophagi make this quite clear. Priests, on the other hand, had to maintain a clean-shaven appearance at all times and were forbidden from growing beards. The majority of Egyptian kids were also forced to shave their heads. The majority of young guys did this, but some ladies also shaved their heads. They were only permitted to have hair on the back of their heads, which often resembled a current ponytail. Like early European times, Egyptians would dress up for important occasions with specially made wigs. There were tiered wigs that would have been manufactured from human hair or palm fiber, but many of these wigs would have been braided and worn in the early Egyptian dynasties. These wigs could be adorned with a variety of items, including stones, diamonds, chains, and colorful threads. Wigs were often used to demonstrate rank or authority by the most affluent members of society. Clothing. Much of the restrictions placed on hairstyles would also apply to the types of clothes that Egyptians were permitted to don. Most ladies would have expected to dress in a form-fitting robe that fell to their ankles. Contrary to this, most kids wouldn't have any clothing on. While some kids would use clothing to protect their lower bodies, kids would often play nude. This has been shown by the frequent appearance of naked infants in the carvings on the sarcophagi of pharaohs. When they reached age 12 or when they began to mature, children had to dress in this manner. Yet many young ladies and elderly women refused to cover their top bodies with garments even after this. Instead, they would adorn themselves with different kinds of jewelry or stones. The legend of the pyramid slaves. The Egyptian pyramids are well known as one of the world's natural marvels. The biggest myth that has persisted for years is that they were constructed by slave laborers who were beaten, tortured, or otherwise coerced against their will. We still don't know how they're constructed. Modern research, however, indicates that this is not at all the case. The pharaoh and other prominent people in society regarded the builders of the pyramids with great respect. These laborers often came from lower class or impoverished backgrounds. and they were requested to construct the pyramids in return for a sizable sum of money. Also, they would be well-fed, often receiving meals made of beef or sheep. Some argue that in addition to being provided a comfortable existence while working, they would also get a lovely place to stay after a long day. These people were not slaves, although they belonged to a lower social stratum. They had a great deal of respect for their leaders and want to be a part of something far greater than themselves. In many instances, the deceased pyramid laborers would be interred close to the pyramids, and the majority of them would be buried with food and drink, a burial ritual that was often only performed for the wealthy. It's a misunderstanding of history to suggest that individuals who had been whipped or otherwise abused constructed the pyramids. Beds, bed frames, and pillows would have been utilized quite differently by Egyptians than they are now. Beds would have been constructed from materials like metal, iron, fabric, plant fiber, or even rocks. Pillows would have been made of metal, ivory, or wood, and there would have been a strong idea that you should have your head lifted high above your body as you slept. Albeit of inferior quality, blankets and bedding would have been somewhat comparable to what we use today. It's incredible how important minorities were to Egyptian history. We still don't know for sure if these positions were intended for all short individuals or just for those who were born with dwarfism. In any case, we can be certain that short people were quite important to Egyptian culture and would have had critical responsibilities to do. Most of these individuals were referred to as pygmies at the time. While they were free to pursue nearly any vocational path they choose, they were often persuaded to become priests. Various phrases in Egyptian culture relate to little individuals since these lesser priests would have been highly respected. Denik, one of the most often used terms, may imply shepherd, dancing dwarf, or clothing dwarf. While we can't be sure, it's thought that they got these nicknames because of their diminutive size and slumped bodies, which are typical of persons with dwarfism. There are representations of little people on gravestones, in artwork, and other locations around the nation. The fact that smaller individuals are often seen wearing the finest apparel that would have been accessible is intriguing. Some probably even wore wigs. This implies that little people were undoubtedly among the most elite members of society. In fact, given that some Egyptians believed that small people had a deeper relationship with God, there's reason to think that they would have been regarded as spiritually superior to the majority of people, including employing little people as a symbol of fertility and particular skills. But once the old dynasty started to fall apart and the new kingdom took over, tiny people were no longer held in such regard. Let's now discuss Egyptian diets. Hence, as we discussed before, the people who constructed the pyramids would have been given steak and lamb, even though this is probably not what an average Egyptian laborer would have eaten. He would most likely subsist on veggies, cereals, and rice instead. Researchers examined 45 mummies that had been excavated from ancient Egypt to determine the kind of foods that would have been served on an ordinary Egyptian's daily meal. They looked inside these mummies and discovered that the majority of their diet would have consisted of grains and bread. Our researchers had an incredible glimpse into the everyday meals of ancient Egyptians, thanks to the tissue samples. They would have consumed vegetables, oats, wheat, and barley in addition to staple cereals like rice. Many Egyptians even developed a taste for grapes and other fruits. Although many of the fruits available today were not widely available in ancient Egypt, typical foods they consumed were dates, delicious figs, and other fruits that were simple to cultivate. Contrarily, cattle ranchers and breeders would have mostly subsisted on meat from animals like cows or sheep. Salmon would have been another typical food. There's undoubtedly still a lot to discover about the Egyptians and how they could have gone about their everyday lives. Yet scientists are coming closer every day to solving the riddles that have bedeviled this long-forgotten region of the Earth for a very long time. We could eventually start to solve the riddles that have been lost to time with more time and inquiry. Now it's your turn to share your thoughts and opinions. What surprised you the most about the ancient Egyptians? Do you have any questions or comments about what we discussed in this video? Let us know in the comments below and keep the conversation going. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos on interesting historical facts and mysteries. Thank you for watching.